So I recently discovered a secret document for the original Mass Effect's plot, and it wildly comes close to what the next Mass Effect's plot probably is. It could connect to the protagonist's special abilities, pinpoint the setting, explain an Andromeda cliffhanger, and even detail how we'll combat the villains. It basically tells us the roots of what makes Mass Effect, and the teases we've seen so far directly connect to what's written on that page. Before we get to the original plot's contents and how the teases connect to it though, we need some context. Why do I think the next Mass Effect is going to reuse its original plot idea? The answer to that is tied to the mysterious code of Epsilon, Oculon, and Nebula. When the dust finally settled on N7 Day 2023, we were left with one final mystery, which was what the heck Epsilon, Oculon, and Nebula could mean. Were we supposed to take the first letters of each word to spell out Eon? Or was each word supposed to stand for something else, like the fifth letter of the Greek alphabet, an I, and a specific nebula like Orion? I had originally thought that these types of wacky guesses were the code's intention, and I had eventually landed on this being a sequence to unlock the relay from the previous year. But now, I think Epsilon, Oculon, and Nebula stand for something much simpler. This phrase is likely a direct message to fans that Mass Effect is going to return to its roots. And I believe that because these words are directly tied to a page on Mass Effect's origins. In the book BioWare Stories and Secrets from 25 Years of Game Development, there's a page that features these three words. And that page is this one, with all three words right here. So why are they all on the same page anyway? Well, these words were all potential names for the IP that was eventually called Mass Effect. Now, even though these words are on a page about Mass Effect's name, I don't think the point of them was to hint at what the next Mass Effect will be called. And I mean, Dragon Age 4 went from Dreadwolf to the Veilguard at the last second, so I wouldn't put stock into early titles anyway. So if Epsilon, Oculon, and Nebula weren't supposed to lead us to the name of the next game, why bring us to this page? Well, I think the point of finding this here was to show us what Mass Effect was originally about. Essentially, to discover the roots of Mass Effect, because that's what the next Mass Effect is going to return to. So, what are the roots of Mass Effect? This page and its potential titles directly tell us. One of the potential names for Mass Effect was Unearthed, because the IP wanted to feature digging up ruins, like the Prothean ones on Mars, and humanity's ascendance into the unknown. Throughout the trilogy, there was plenty of diving into new unknown areas, and in Andromeda, even more so. So one of Mass Effect's roots is this feeling of exploration of the unknown. Another root is the Central Space Station, which eventually became known as the Citadel. The Citadel featured a hub that players could return to that featured a ton of aliens, so it basically was a station that embodied the sci-fi vibes at Mass Effect's core. In Mass Effect 2, we had Omega instead of the Citadel, and in Andromeda, we frequently returned to the Nexus. And then finally, the heart of why Mass Effect got its name. The IP focused on a fifth fundamental force, which became accessible through the use of Element Zero, biotics, and manipulating dark energy. Dark energy was going to be a larger part of why the Reapers were attacking the Milky Way, but then became more relevant in how the Reapers were defeated through the use of the Crucible. And in Andromeda, dark energy made an appearance again with the Scourge, which also featured wacky space-time manipulation properties too. Clearly, this is the root at the heart of the franchise. Fundamental forces that mess with physics as we know it. Can't have Mass Effect without there being effects on mass. Of course, none of this is mind-blowing stuff for a sci-fi franchise though. Study.com lists the common themes in sci-fis as having space travel, distant worlds, alien races, and new technologies. The beauty of Mass Effect as a sci-fi though was the delivery of these classic themes. It's not just space travel to unknown places. It's flying at FTL speeds on the Normandy or Tempest to save the galaxy or cluster from disaster. It doesn't just have alien races. It has aliens that become your best friends, love interests, or mortal enemies. And of course, it's not just about new technologies. It showed us a new form of biotic power we've never seen before, and fascinating phenomena with mysteries galore. The only thing I'd add that makes Mass Effect stronger is having a solid story delivered with a mature tone, which is where Andromeda faltered. But luckily, the Mass Effect team knows this is part of the secret sauce, which the next Mass Effect will return to. So this page, which the hint of Epsilon, Oculon, and Nebula led us to, revealed to us the roots of Mass Effect. Before we get to how the original plot of Mass Effect makes this all work, let's first go over what we currently know about the 5th game's plot. Because based on the Game Awards trailer, we probably know quite a bit. Major Mass Effect spoilers for the entire series will follow. The trailer for the next Mass Effect seems to be hinting at the return of an advanced Prothean empire hell-bent on the Milky Way's destruction. At the beginning of the trailer, it links the Jardaan from Andromeda and the Protheans in the Milky Way as being one and the same, or at least some portion of the Prothean Empire having escaped to Andromeda. Now, from what we know about the Prothean Empire, they controlled races through force, assimilating them into Prothean culture so that they think of themselves as Prothean. They did this to fight off a hostile machine intelligence in what was known as the Metacon War. Basically, their empire was built on unwilling slaves forced to fight a war on their master's behalf. Now, in Andromeda, we don't know much about the Jardaan, but we did hear a message from them, which was this text on screen. After Sam translated it for us, it read as follows: "Meridian contains all the work of the Jardaan. Nothing else matters. I will send it far. We can return one day. Continue the process of renewal." Now to me, continue the process of renewal, if the Jardaan are some form of Protheans, could definitely refer to the renewal of an empire that was built on slave labor enforced by the Protheans. So how does the Prothean Empire relate back to the original roots of Mass Effect and what the next Mass Effect's plot might look like? Crazily enough, the Jardaan vying for power with slavery was actually very close to the idea for Mass Effect's first ever plot. I was recently going through the final hours of Mass Effect 3, an interactive write-up that details the development of the trilogy, when I stumbled across this document. This write-up reveals the original plot for Mass Effect, which is titled Master Slaves. It includes plot details like the hook, concept twist, special character, and even the moral compass of the special character. Everything below the moral compass section doesn't really apply to what we're discussing here, but feel free to pause if you want to look through it. Now, the interesting part about this page is it takes the roots we figured out earlier and applies it to an actual plot. In the hook, we have alien species competing for control of the galaxy through the use of technology left behind by an extinct creator race. That alone has the unearthed, alien, and technology roots all in one. It also talks about how the inherent ability humanity possesses to use this ancient technology makes them important to the overall plot. Now, in the trilogy, this idea morphed into Shepard's ability to interact with and survive the Prothean beacon, and in Andromeda, Ryder's ability to interact with Remtech. Other similarities that made it into Mass Effect are the jump stations that became the mass relays, and a galactic council on Star City, which eventually became the Citadel. Pretty cool to note that the Citadel eventually forming a star-like shape near the end of the trilogy was likely because of this original idea. So even though this original plot didn't make it exactly into the Mass Effect we know and love, parts of it definitely did. And based on the next Mass Effect teases I've analyzed, this document might become incredibly more relevant than it already is, especially because of the Master Slaves concept, and the concept twist written here. In the concept twist, it lists that humans were supposed to be an engineered slave class of a creator race millennia ago. We already know that this isn't true, because Javik confirmed the Protheans were watching humanity's early ancestors. But this is likely true of a different race in Mass Effect Andromeda. The Angara were organics made by the Jardaan for some unknown purpose. I wouldn't be surprised if their actual purpose was for slave labor, especially if the Jardaan were looking to restart their empire in the Andromeda galaxy. Once again, this OG plot was likely reused in the 4th game. Now, as to why this is relevant in the next Mass Effect, I recently broke down how the Jardaan have likely abandoned the Helios cluster to reform their empire in the Milky Way once again. And if they do, then Master Slave sounds like the perfect description of what the Prothean Empire used to be, enslaving races against their will in order to rule the galaxy. So if the major point of the next game is this kind of master-slave story, then everything else on this page might act as a blueprint to the next Mass Effect's plot, which weirdly enough is backed up by the teases we've seen. Let's put everything together from what Mass Effect's roots are to how the next Mass Effect's plot might play out. For the new technology route, we've had multiple teases that Shepard will return, along with Ryder too, both former protagonists with inherent abilities that could be directly used against the evolved Protheans' technology. This would make them uniquely positioned to help humanity and the other Milky Way races, like the special character is supposed to do. And in terms of new fundamental forces, we've got plenty of teases for that too. A lot of the concept art we've seen implies wacky new travel will be possible via wormholes and even with time travel shenanigans. And we can't forget that Gamble has prompted fans with the question of, what about the galaxies in his blog post from N7 Day 2023? Pretty fishy question to bring up if the next Mass Effect isn't going to address said galaxies. In terms of the original plot, exploring uncharted and underdeveloped areas was a key line, along with expanding the galactic frontier. And in between those sentiments, we see another key connection to the next Mass Effect: to establish new jump stations. In one of the biggest teases so far, we're literally seeing construction of a human-made relay for the very first time. Yeah, that seems like establishing new jump stations to me. And the crazy part is, that's just the first route. For the aliens route, we've seen an illustration last year that could very well be showing us the Citadel. There's a lot of new aliens milling about that we've never seen before, along with some well-known ones too. If this isn't the Citadel, then it might be our first glimpse at whatever the new hub in the Milky Way could be. Liara is probably sitting near the back here, and Gamble did go out of his way to mention we should play the Shadow Broker DLC. Maybe our new hub in the next Mass Effect will be centered around our Shadow Broker. It does say in the original plot that the protagonist would be hunting down important artifacts and information. Could our former archaeologist's hub be where these artifacts are gathered? In terms of the setting for the next game, the Milky Way has been teased multiple times, with places like Ilium and Thessia being shown. Since it's likely showing a time period right after the Reaper War, the Hook section could basically describe where we left off from Mass Effect 3. It lists that alien species will compete for control of the galaxy, which in a power vacuum after the Reaper War definitely checks out. The Asari homeworld was severely attacked, the Turians took a hit, and the Krogan could be vying for power with massive numbers. Throw in everyone trying to get ahead with vast amounts of Reaper tech at their side, there'd be competition galore. Control and Synthesis Reapers could be manipulated to unknowingly help in arms races, and in Destroy, disassembly of Reaper tech might be the way to get ahead. Even though Synthesis supposedly helped everyone understand one another, it probably wouldn't stop races from wanting to have the most power in the galaxy. And then there's the exploration section. Gamble did reveal on Twitter that there would be exploration of some kind in the next game. Maybe this details somewhat how it'll happen. It says that the character will explore the galaxy in search of creator artifacts and answers to the relationship between the humans, the creators, and their technology. If the special characters, i.e. the protagonists, will be both Shepard and Ryder, then this is the perfect mix of exploration for both of them. Shepard, with their Prothean-like abilities, could search for the artifacts, since they already have an affinity for finding them. And maybe, with them finding these artifacts, it could be a way to combat the Jardaan directly by using technology of the thought-to-be-extinct race. For Ryder, one of the most important cliffhangers in the Helios cluster was the relationship between the Angara and the Jardaan. So they might be in charge of finding the answers to that relationship, potentially through the use of their Remtech abilities. This page clearly holds some answers as to what the next Mass Effect will hold, but the one answer it doesn't have is the how. How exactly will this type of master-slaves plot begin? What could possibly kick off a story about an empire returning to finish what it started? Well, the answer to that isn't anywhere on this page, but it likely was revealed to us in the next Mass Effect's teaser trailer. Watch this trailer breakdown next to discover what crazy event in the next Mass Effect is likely going to kick off another galactic-wide war. See you there!